Gentlemen, the time has come once again to discuss things.
Hi everyone, welcome to another episode of Geeky Gentlemen. I am Sid Part 2. Joining me today is...
A Geek for Fun.
And Steve.
And Steve. Tonight we're reviewing something that Alfie picked. And what is that thing, Alfie?
Tonight we are reviewing specifically the first two episodes of the new Netflix adaptation of One Piece.
Indeed. It's kind of been crazy to watch the reaction for this one because Netflix live-action anime adaptations have not gone well. It's kind of the vibe I've gotten from the anime community over the last, 10 years or so that they've been doing these. It's not gone over great. Is that fair to say?
Oh yeah, absolutely. And not just Netflix in general. I think that's just a general rule, albeit some exceptions like the Rurouni Kenshin movies or even the Bleach movie and stuff. By and large, live-action anime adaptations are like reviled and have a worse rep than video game adaptations, even among like their communities. I think that's fair to say.
They are consistently produced compared to video game adaptations, which is the funny
This is true.
part. Like, doesn't matter how badly reviewed they are, there will always be another one.
Yeah. I've seen memes that joke about specifically the Netflix live-action adaptations are, like, some of the worst. God, what was it? Fucking Kyle Hill did a video where it was like, can you actually train like Goku with weighted clothes? And it just came down to say, no, you can't. It's a bad idea. But like someone fucking like took the image of him from the video where he's in just like this really bad Goku cosplay that's actually been like had weights added to it. And they're like, the anime, the manga, the anime, the live-action Netflix adaptation. It's just fucking him. It's like, who did this? And it's like, I don't know. There definitely seemed to be a vibe of truth to it. So it has been very surprising that this one has been so universally praised. I don't think I've actually seen anyone say anything bad about it. I've seen a lot of love pouring out from people who I don't even think liked One Piece before this. In all honesty, I don't think I'd ever seen anyone like as much One Piece discussion and discourse as I have in the lead up and the immediate aftermath of this series.
Something that's like the popularity alone is kind of worth talking about because I'm curious to see what Steve thinks about this, because I think what this message, in the same way that the immediate reaction to Barbie was, let's make a whole bunch of toy movies, and this has become the most viewed Netflix series in, I don't know if it's all time, but it's at least in terms of just like a lot of their recent output. Like this has done better than Wednesday. This has done better than all of the recent originals and stuff that have come out. This is like number one in I think like 64 countries at the moment. It's done exceedingly well for a streaming show. Steve, do you think that's like going to lead to a bunch of studio executives being like, all right, we need to start making Naruto?
Oh no, 100% not. No. Here's the thing about streaming numbers, okay? They are bullshit. They don't exist. No one has the real ones because the companies that release them just tell you the good numbers. Sandman did really well, episode by episode. But the way Netflix counts views, it's only measuring in terms of number of people binging an episode. And binging an episode is not the same thing as completing an episode of the show. It's not counting total amount of people watching an episode beginning to end. It's counting how many people have clicked on the episode and watched some portion of it. And so the numbers are extremely skewed. I mean, like, Disney refuses to give us numbers on Andor and Obi-Wan, but they gave us numbers for Ahsoka just because it was getting like a middling reaction early on before the first episode dropped, you know? Like, it's entirely a strategic thing. And whenever a Netflix original comes out and it says this is the most popular one that they've ever released, you can tell that they're full of shit because every time you see what record it broke, it was literally just the last thing that came out and that was popular. So this did better than Stranger Things season 4 and Wednesday. Cool. That was like the last big thing you released. Wait like 3 months, and I'm sure whatever other thing you're releasing is going to cause record-breaking Netflix numbers. Unlike Barbie and Oppenheimer, the release and reception to those movies actually caused Warner Brothers to make money, which means they're probably going to have Mattel invest in a bunch of other Barbie products because they know now that there's a market for it. With streaming, your competition is not only everything on Netflix, not only everything in streaming, but every single other piece of content that's out there. So it's a lot harder for Netflix as a company to like justify greenlighting a second season of anything, regardless of how successful it is. Like, you look at Wednesday, right? And that show was the most popular thing on Netflix when it came out. And it still took them forever to commit to whether or not they were going to give it a season 2 and when it was going to start filming and who was writing it. Stranger Things has been going on Netflix since they started doing originals, and it still only had 4 seasons because of the amount of time it takes for Netflix to decide when you're getting a new season, when production is going to get started, when it's going to come out. Like, it's one of those things where success on Netflix does not translate to actual monetary success, like we were joking earlier. Like, at the end of the day, tech companies are very bad at making money, and whether or not One Piece does well does not translate to Netflix making money, which means regardless of how many views it has, there's no guarantee of it getting more seasons, especially given the reported production budget of the show.
It's interesting. That's why I wanted to ask you specifically, because you know more about that things from me. I guess I'm curious then, if not for Netflix itself, is I think the brand of One Piece and Oda, and I think Shueisha and Toei are going to make a lot of money from this. So I wonder if that maybe incents them to like license out or kind of push stuff for like if Toei has a lot of success from this and more people buy One Piece volumes, etc. Does that force them to like, oh, let's get the Dragon Ball movie to happen again, kind of thing, as a possibility?
I'd be surprised, because I mean, we joked about this earlier too, but it's not like reception or money really dictates whether or not a manga gets a further adaptation, you know? Like, every subsequent One Piece animated movie doesn't have to do better than the last in order for them to make another one. Way of the House Husband is another thing that got adapted by Netflix that no one really talks about, but it's a good show, and it committed to 2 seasons now so far, and it's one of those things where like it's just popular enough where you can kind of keep coasting. Especially with Toy and given like their historic business practices and stuff, I don't think this is going to like incentivize them to do any of this one way or the other. I think really all it tells them is whether or not an adaptation is good, there's a sense of marketing around it that makes it worth doing. And so they're just going to keep doing it anyway. A Bleach live action show has been like rumored or in talks for a really, really long time. I imagine that this is going to be the success of this might like finally motivate Netflix to do a Bleach TV show. But I really, really would hesitate to give credit to One Piece being good in terms of any of that getting greenlit, because I don't think that's a factor for these kinds of things. I think it's really just a matter of like, did One Piece enter the zeitgeist in a nominal enough way that we can now justify doing another one? And when the bar is that low, the answer is almost always yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Steve, I can always count on you to just bring up the mood in a room.
No, it's interesting. I wanted.
You should do children's birthday parties and cancer wards.
I wanted just the informed, insightful take on it before we jumped into the series itself, because, like I said, like Ian's right, is even just from like the eye test of just seeing the discourses, this is the most One Piece anyone has ever taught, and that's not solely because of this. It's because of like the anime with like the new transformation, stuff like that. Like it's been the year of One Piece.
It did hit at a really good time for the like franchise as a whole, because the manga's getting close to wrapping up, the anime's at like a really like I don't know if like Super Saiyan level like craze about
Absolutely
it.
is the closest thing we'll
Yeah.
probably say in our lifetime to it, for
Yeah.
sure.
That's like I don't know shit about One Piece. I watched a couple episodes of the anime for a thing Alfie and I are working on just to get a flavor of the character and world. I watched this, and I've seen like panels and discussion and stuff, and I've always thought it like looked really fugly. So this is like an interesting way to get an into it, because I don't have to like see the art style that just really does turn me off. And no disrespect to Oda, the guy's apparently just this absolute fucking workhorse, as we were talking about last week, but I just don't like, it just doesn't mesh with me, so I don't really want to pursue it. Not that I would really go out of my way to read a manga in the first place, but even the anime, trying to replicate his art style is like, ugh, to me. So this was just an interesting way in which to watch it, in that it is a live action adaptation that doesn't have a lot of, like, it takes inspiration from a lot of his art, but people aren't 7 billion times bigger than the main cast. There's just like, here's this skinny young adult, and here's this buff older adult, and that's like the biggest size difference you get in of the thing. Because I remember the like female pirate that's on the ship in the very beginning of the anime, and they replicate her for this. I remember her just being fucking massive, and from what I understand, that's not even like remotely as big as some of the more top tier villains get in One Piece. It's a very like consistent anime thing of just drawing certain characters as ridiculously huge. I remember like fucking Trigun has that for like their first villains. They're just gigantic. I don't know why that's such a like go-to art style thing, but it does always stand out to me as like, man, can't replicate that in live action without getting weird quick. And so it's kind of interesting to see that they didn't. But I don't know, this is an interesting watch. I kind of liked it. I don't know how much of this was just, this is kind of the vibe you get in the comics, but or how much of it is just, no, this is just how you shoot pirates in live action now. This is just the way to do it. Is I did get some very like Pirates of the Caribbean vibes with this, in the way in which it's like visually presented. There's like the obvious manga and anime inspired looks, like particularly to a lot of the ships and stuff, but just, I don't know, the kind of the grungy, dirty, sweaty look on everybody's face, and like the foggy backgrounds and stuff. I don't know, just very much screamed to me like a lot of the visual stylings that you saw in the pirate movies.
Yeah, I definitely think that's definitely an inspiration. it really kind of, because the show is very different from that, and so is the manga's harder to tell because obviously the black and white, but just Oda's line work is very clean, and like when characters get beat up and bloody is after a fight, when they're like on the ship and stuff, they're often like very clean and the clothes are very thing. I think Nami is a very good example where she's always drawn to be like in her best condition and always with perfect hair and stuff, whereas in this show they like make a point in a later episode where like she's like, "Oh, I get to have a bath. That's great." Which is like, well, yeah, if you're on the open sea for that long, it is gonna lead to a grimy and a gross. And I think that's something with to talk of like a positive with this. I think the visuals in terms of the production design and the costume design for this are like phenomenal. I really, really like the approach they took here, where everyone's design is like 1-to-1. They just make it dirtier. And I think that's such a genius idea of taking these like, or they give it texture. No one in like Luffy's outfit is Luffy's outfit from the manga. He's just clothes. They don't try and put a reason behind it. There's no origin behind the hat. Has an origin, obviously, but like there's no like.
I was about to say there's a whole fucking thing about the hat. What are you talking about?
Right, but, like the vest isn't like textured and layered to make sense for a rubber man. They're just like that's just the clothes he wears, and it's bright, but we make it look like real clothing. The one that stands out to me most is Gold Roger, like the king of the pirates in the intro. He's always meant to look like the most stereotypical pirate, and that's like kind of the point of his character. Is the king was the he's like when we do Dracula, right, and we make Dracula the most stereotypical vampire ever, just because the iconography. I really like that. Like he's got fucked up teeth, his skin's kind of like like the mustache is all dirty. When he laughs, that you can get that thing. Is like this really sells you like immediately on how extravagant things are going to be, and when you have hands and free swords and all the anime tropes, for me at least, it blends in as a sincerity of we are taking this material seriously, but we are not unaware of what this is. We're just not going to draw attention to it. We're just going to let you go with the vibe, and that's a sense of world building, which is a lot closer to something like Star Wars or Harry Potter even, and I think that's really effective in terms of getting you into a story of just letting it be its own visuals, and then if it looks weird, you turn to whoever you're watching it with and you say, "Hey, that is kind of goofy," but like they don't need to do that. Like the audience can just do that on their own, and I think that's really effective.
It doesn't have like the MCU thing of like, haha, isn't this funny? Isn't it?
Yeah, it
just
is. It just exists.
Yeah, I don't know. It's an interesting watch in that way, and there's like elements where I think going directly off of the designs from the manga might be a bit of a hindrance because like sometimes it looks maybe a little too ridiculous. The one that like got me and I was like, no, was fucking that first dude Zoro kills with the red mohawk. That just fucking sent me. I just thought that one looked so stupid. But I don't know, like that. There was that, and then designs that I think might have ended up looking like really bad. I think actually pulled off quite well. Captain Buggy, I thought ended up looking pretty good. It's kind of funny because he's at the end of episode 1, and I'm just like, okay, fucking wannabe Heath Ledger ass. But then the more time you spend with him, you get a better insight in the performance, and a lot of it I think just ends up working a lot better. I think you're still seeing a lot of Joker a la Heath Ledger inspiration in the performance and just the grungy clown look. But I don't know, it was kind of interesting. I guess I maybe a professional reviewer would have like looked up what the fuck Buggy looks like in the manga and the anime first, but I'm gonna guess that they went a little more grunge with it.
It's like the context.
Yeah, Buggy One Piece. Oh, did you put it
Yeah.
down there? Thanks. Yeah, I see. I kind of had the feeling like he's not exactly. You don't get like the tattered looking hair and stuff, and like the more muted colors, at least from that initial look. Yeah, I mean he's not gigantic either, though. He's a lot more vibrant in the anime and stuff from what I'm seeing. But yeah, they pulled from different sources and inspirations. Sometimes going too direct to what something would look like on screen could just be too much. I think they were smart enough in how to adapt it. Not ashamed of it. Not just doing like, oh, he wears the hat for like 10 seconds, or he's got blue hair for like a frame, and it's not even actually that his hair is blue. He just steps into a blue light or anything. It's being genuine enough, and trying its best to translate it to live action in a way that works. So appreciated. Steve, you've been quiet. What are your thoughts on One Piece?
I thought this was really bad.
Oh.
I thought this was really bad. Okay. I'm glad Alfie asked me about the Netflix stuff early on, just like the behind the scenes about like tech companies and streaming services and stuff, because if you were putting this on the level of a Netflix original, this is really, really average. Like, it's not offensively bad, it's not brilliant, it's just average. It's middle of the road of anything you could watch on Netflix. But the bar for that is so low that it just kind of makes me sad to think that this is just considered average. I thought episode 1 was awful. I thought episode 1 was just like, they don't understand how to structure a story. It is for context, the first chapter of One Piece in the manga, and every time this gets adapted, they always kind of skip it or push it later, even in the anime. But the first chapter of One Piece is all of the backstory stuff with red-haired Shanks and Kid Luffy and eating the fruit and getting the arm bitten off and all that stuff. Like, that's all from the very beginning. And then chapter 2 is is when you meet Luffy in the present day for the very first time, and he jumps onto the boat and he meets Kobe, and he defeats what's her name? Valdia, something like that.
Yeah,
Elvida. He beats Elvida, and that's chapter 2. So it's not super unique that this decides to open with Elvida and Kobe as the beginning and then just intercut with the Shank stuff. Like, that's pretty standard for this. But chapter 2 is the first 15 minutes of the episode. Then it just keeps fucking going for 45 more minutes, just giving you random plot points and introducing your characters with no concept whatsoever of how to structure an episode to have a distinct beginning, middle, and end. Your episode was done 20 minutes in, and then you just kept going, and you didn't even bother to like come up with a through line to make the beginning, middle, and end of the episode feel like it was about one cohesive thing. It just kept running. And this is a thing that all Netflix shows do. So it's not like offensively bad in that way, but it's just so annoying to think that like the standard of TV shows we watch now is you're expected to watch an episode that has no internal structure whatsoever. Episode 2 is better. Episode 2 does have a distinct beginning, middle, and end because the whole thing is just about Buggy the Clown. I don't like their take on Buggy very much. I think it sounds funny, but I think he's too competent. Part of what's fun about Buggy is that he's a joke that keeps failing upwards. There's no reason this man should be like a warlord of the sea at this point, but he just keeps fucking failing upwards, and that's kind of the fun of him. But Buggy's like a good microcosm of my other big problem, which is just like the actor is playing it too straight, and I feel like the personalities of these characters are not coming through because everyone's kind of just playing it on one note. Zoro is strictly no nonsense. He doesn't have the classic sort of anime isolated loner, but is really emotive and really angry personality that you kind of expect from these kinds of characters. He is just stoic. He's just stoic and no nonsense. There's nothing else to that performance. I think the Nami actress is really bad. I think she's just wooden as all hell. And Buggy is maybe one of the better actors along with Luffy and Garp, but the Buggy take is just so generic. We're like, yeah, he's just scary clown man. He's He's not. The thing about Buggy that's unique, I feel like they just kind of completely left on the table, which is that he's a fucking joke that he keeps failing upwards. So what was the point? I think this is a lot like the Cowboy Bebop Netflix show, which is it's so
I
beholden.
forgot about that.
Yeah, most people did. It's so beholden to the moments and iconography and the production that feels authentic because the manga artist and the company signed off on it. That it's really failing to decide what needs to be changed or updated or visually altered to make it an adaptation. If you want to do all 100 chapters of the first bit of One Piece and 8 episodes of TV, fine. If you want to say One Piece is poorly paced because it takes so long to get through All Park, fine. But you know what? 20 minutes for your first episode is a much better pace than an hour to do basically nothing after the first 20 minutes. So I really didn't like this. I think it's a better adaptation than most manga live action adaptations, but I don't think that's saying much because I don't think it's doing much adapting, to be honest. I feel like it's just like One Piece, the live action Cliff Notes, and there's nothing about it that really sticks out to me to want to watch it beyond this. Where I'm like, if I want to watch Zoro be a badass, I'm just gonna read the fucking manga because at least he has a personality in the manga.
Damn. See, I didn't hate it that much. I didn't love it. I didn't think it was the greatest thing ever. I had enough fun with it, but
It's average.
I will
right?
agree.
Like that's
Yeah, I would agree with you that it doesn't really make me want to go seek out anything else from One Piece, which maybe is a good thing, maybe is not. I mean, this feels like satisfied enough. I'm kind of on the fence of whether or not I really want to watch more of it, but it seemed like I don't know, maybe being the Cliff Notes version is what it needed to be.
And this is sort of what I mean by it being average, right? Like nothing I said is so outside the norm of what you would expect to really consider like it's a failure. Like your reaction is exactly what I think most people non-manga fans reaction would be. It's average. It's fine. You didn't love it, you didn't hate it, you might watch more of it, you might not. It's completely inoffensive and neutral. And that's my take on it too. But I've seen so many shows like this that it feels like the bar for average is so low to the ground that like any tiny criticism unravels the whole thing. Like it's not a big thing to say that the first episode is paced poorly, but like when you really break down how like it's just got literally no structure whatsoever, and then you start thinking about crap like Obi-Wan and how the first 2 episodes of that have literally no structure either, it starts to snowball into this much bigger problem. Contained within itself, it's not bad. It's not below average. It's just average. It's just the problem is the bar for average is so low.
My thing with it as well is this isn't something that I walked away loving either. And I think between everyone, I've got the most experience with One Piece, but I still kind of have exactly your take, Ian, where I just think the art's fugly and I don't have any interest in exploring a lot of the things. And whenever I do have people around me and stuff who get into One Piece and I consume it alongside them, it just frustrates me more because I see really good ideas that I like and then I see like pacing or what have you like drag it down. So One Piece is a kind of a complex franchise with my relationship with, where I can respect it a lot, but I don't particularly enjoy my time with it outside of like isolated moments. And for like a long running series that's as long as that, you should be way more consistent than like the isolated moments I enjoy. So for the live action version, I was always kind of rooting it because exactly what you said, Steve, with like the Cliff Notes version is I want the Cliff Notes version of One Piece. I think One Piece is a series that is better through Cliff Notes. I think it is a series with a lot of fat, and I think Oda needs desperately someone who will cut it down. I don't think this is the best execution of that, and I don't think this is the smartest execution of that either. I think you're completely right that the first episode is definitely poorly paced because it's trying to cover a lot of different segments of the manga in one giant piece, just basically going through the chapters and stuff. But at the same time, I want to fight back a little bit on the bar being low for average, because I think the thing that like sets this apart for me that it wouldn't otherwise on a writing or acting level are all the creative concepts and ideas and just kind of ideas present to the world of One Piece that gives it an inherent value over a lot of like average, like say like Obi-Wan and stuff. Like, it's kind of cheating because it's taking it from a work that's existed before, right? With the manga, where Oda's come up with all these things, but because as Oda's involved in it and he's had a say in a lot of these decisions, I think it's fair to say where there's more interesting and new ideas in this that if you've never seen One Piece before and this is your first experience to it, that come out of this first episode of television of just things you don't normally get to see and things you don't normally get to think. And even for fans of the thing, I think there's like an inherent novelty to seeing that done beat for beat. That even if it isn't the most cleanly way to execute it, I enjoy that experience. The thing I think I've used is we on this show always kind of talk about like how cool would it be if they just did the comic, right? If they just took the Batman run or whatever and made like a cartoon over it or made like a movie over it. And like really, if you took King's Run, which is designed to be a comic, and just made that an episode of television, it wouldn't really work 9 times out of 10. But fuck it if it wouldn't be fun to watch, right? Like, just to see it. So, like, that's kind of what I have with this, where I think this is just a really fun experience into an interesting world. And I like a lot of the performances, and I like a lot of the dynamics that we see, and I like the action, where I'm willing to go with it in a way where objectively, I don't think it's anything special. And even above all of these things, it's not my favorite thing in the world, and it's not something that's making me have a greater experience and stuff like that. But I do think there is a value to this where there's a creativity on display here in trying to find ways to make this work that I do think puts it above a lot of the other things you've mentioned. Because I think that does take a lot of work to pull off.
The thing I'll say here is, just to kind of temper my criticism of it, is you can tell that if you gave this money to these creators and they put it on a pre-Discovery merger HBO, it would actually be really good. I think the fact that it is on Netflix specifically is the problem with the whole show. Ever since the writer's strike started, we've been getting like more and more stories about how streaming companies work and what kind of notes they give and stuff. And there was one specific one that was shared, I forget by what writer, but like how Netflix would issue notes to the scripts of shows because they want the episode of the series that's being written to not be so engaging that you still scroll on your phone while you're watching it. That the streaming binging format breaks down if the piece of television is too interesting. And like fundamentally, when you're operating on that level, you know it's just going to be a broken product to begin with. And I think there's a lot of things about this show, specifically in the pacing, and in the idea that you could like greenlight this kind of project without like a certain kind of multi-season commitment and give it this amount of money, that feels like fundamentally Netflix-fies broken. Because any reasonable person would say you're going to build all these sets, you're going to hire all these actors, you're going to make an 8-hour movie out of one season of a manga that's been running since the late 90s. This is all a fucking sunk cost if you don't feel like you're going to get your money's worth out of it. And Netflix, true to form, is not going to get its money out of it because that's just the way the company is run. And so it really feels like you're shooting everyone involved in the foot, because you listen to interviews with the guy who plays Luffy and he's fucking having the time of his life. This is like a dream gig for him. And you talk about like the behind the scenes stuff with the creators and the showrunners and stuff. They clearly really want to make a One Piece show the way Neil Gaiman wanted to make his Sandman show, or the way Peter Jackson wanted to make Lord of the Rings.
King Kong.
But I don't think that I don't think you're getting that on Netflix, and I think the seams of this show really start to show when you start getting into those Netflixisms of the pacing and the acting and the set design and stuff, where like you can see it's sort of lopsided in make it iconic enough so people remember things from the manga. Don't adapt it so much to where you're changing it for your new medium in order to make it fit better on a streaming platform. It's really caught between this rock and a hard place where there are really cool things you could do with One Piece visually, but you can't ever go so far with it that it would cause the format to shift fundamentally, because Netflix just isn't going to allow that. And so like episode 1, right? Like episode 1 really does just feel like structurally the same way every first episode of every Netflix show has ever felt. I guarantee you, if like this was on an HBO or something, you would have just 30-minute episodes instead of these hour-long episodes, because you can tighten the story and craft it better. Like Barry, in its entire 4-season run, basically did an entire final season where no episode was longer than 30 minutes. And that was a prestige drama, because they knew they could do that. And I feel like One Piece sort of needed that same treatment. Like, even if you want to say One Piece is too elongated, that there's too much, there's just not enough fast-paced action happening in the series, Oda at least knows how to begin and construct a chapter of the manga where every chapter feels satisfying, even if it's in service to a larger story. He is the undisputed master of being able to do that, where every chapter is defined with a purpose. And this show just kind of can't do that, and that's why I lose interest in it so hard, where I'm like, I just don't care about the ideas if you're like not constructing your show on a level where every episode has a foundational.
Said that. I think the Netflix isms and the thing you're saying again of if this got made on HBO Max, it probably would be a better show. I think all of that is completely right. And like you said about Oda, I agree with all of that, Steve. I think those are definitely like the things that are holding this back the most.
Okay. Well, let's try to be positive for a little bit here, because Steve did mention this, and I did want to talk about it with you'll have to forgive me, I don't know the actor's name, but the guy playing Luffy is a lot of fun.
He's so good.
Oh, he's so good.
He's so good.
Easily my favorite part of the series of watching this. Just the way that he's got such a himbo energy to him. He's like, part of my crew, not a crew. And it doesn't faze him in the slightest. It's fucking beautiful.
What a hard role to cast, man. Like, let's just take a minute to talk about, like, because we had a little trouble with that on our end as well, Ian, and we got the luxury of it's just a voice. To do that as a real human being, someone who is so arch and so pure, right? It's like, again, it's in that Goku mold, and we saw the last time they tried to adapt Goku in live action. Like, it's the
Justin Chatwin was amazing.
it's the type of character though we just don't do in modern fiction anymore. Like, we just don't, especially again in live action television. Like, people just write that off. Like, I truly do think this is probably the most pitch perfect like casting of a wholly good character since Christopher Reeve. And I know that's very hyperbolic, but I'm probably going to stand by it, because I think this kid is just it. Like, he is Luffy. He's like, he's walked off the page. It's crazy.
It's really impressive. I guess one thing I was surprised about is, because he's Hispanic, right? Yeah, it's like he's not working to try to mask an accent at all. You can hear it coming through, and it just kind of works for him. He doesn't feel the need to like hide or try to suppress his accent. And I don't know, it just worked really well for me. I wasn't really kind of prepared for that.
Something
Oda
of the
too
show.
talked about that. Oh, sorry, I was gonna say Oda sort of talked about how like the Straw Hat crew is all sort of supposed to be representative of like different countries and nations and stuff. The One Piece world is very different, and its geography is very weird, and so like there's not like defined nations in the same way we have. And so like everyone in the Straw Hat crew, the whole idea is like Luffy is from one place and he's going and meeting people from different places, so everyone in his crew is representative of someone else in some other period, some other concept. And Oda himself has said that if he was going to cast Luffy in live action, he'd make him Brazilian. So like casting a South American actor is a good idea on that level.
That is really cool. I didn't know that.
Yeah, it's the one kind of anime where like you can actually buy that. Oh, the majority of this cast actually isn't going to be Asian, and like Oda approves that, and he's been in charge of that with the majority of the characters, and it kind of makes Zoro again stand out in that aspect of being able to be more of that kind of like stereotypical anime swordsman character amongst a much more international cast. It gives it a very different vibe, and that's something as well that I think is a positive of this series overall. Is I think a lot of just cool concepts like that, and a lot of these archetypal type of characters and roles that we don't get to see a lot anymore, as like we've become more cynical and we've had stories that always kind of have to have like a grittier hook to it, or some kind of like hope punching through the darkness motif. I think it's really refreshing to have a series that is so good-hearted at its core, where One Piece will have darker subject matter, and the series will cover darker subject things, and the boogie episode leans into trying to be scarier and stuff like that. Like, there's a darker vibe to this than the show, but at the end of the day, the characters and stuff are thoroughly on that optimistic keen. There's not a cynical bone in Oda's body, and that comes through this. And I think that's having your main character would, if Anaki wasn't as good as he is, that would all fall apart. But the fact that he's just so fun to watch on screen, because I had this when I was watching this the first episode, is whenever he's on screen, he's not even acting something. You just kind of want to smile a little bit, because he's like, oh, this fucking little doofus. Like, there's just like a warmth that comes from that, and I think that's what One Piece is really good at when it's at its best, is having just a good time with it, where you don't have to think about things too hard. You don't have to go into like the higher themes of, say, something like a Bleach or a Naruto, where it is trying to be something that's a little bit more philosophical. One Piece will have those moments, but by and large, it is about like a very goofy power set with a goofy main character who has an extremely earnest and heartfelt goal. And there's a lot of really good lines in this, like when he's talking to Kobe, and Kobe's like explaining kind of like the stereotypical idea of a pirate, and like this is like why we should be afraid of them and stuff like kind of that, and then Luffy's just completely dumbfounded by that, and as if it's the most natural thing in the world, he just says something to the effect of like, well, I'm not like those pirates, like I don't want to be like those pirates, I'm a new kind of pirate.
That was something I actually really enjoyed seeing, because I mentioned the Pirates of the Caribbean films earlier, and I remember, like, those were coming out when I was in high school, and I remember, like, the fucking hot takes was, oh, well, the pirates wouldn't be the romantic figures that we think of them as. They would probably be, in our modern terms, rapists and criminals and murderers. And so, you know, showing them so romanticized is actually quite dangerous. Blah, 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 blah. And this is, like, I thought, this struck a really good balance of still bringing in all those fun, swashbuckling adventure kind of vibes with pirates, but also acknowledging, oh no, like the vast majority of them would be fucking terrible. I really liked one of the moments in the buggy episode, but like I feel like they kind of undercut it because they didn't shoot it right. Where almost as soon as they come out of the box and you get like the surprise you're in a fucking carnival circus tent moment, I thought that was pretty good. And then like within that, pretty early on, they show you that everyone in the audience is like chained up, and then just a few minutes later you get what's her name, Nami, okay. You get her running out, and she sees like the fucking destruction that he's wrought upon this island village. And I was like, oh man, that would have been such a good fucking reveal if you didn't show the chains beforehand, you know? They almost had something there, but they kind of fucking like dropped the ball a little bit in the cinematic language for it. Because like you would have assumed there was something going on with the audience, that it wasn't quite right, but like the fact that you know they're in chains before you like see the destruction of their village, I just think was that didn't play super well. But overall, though, you get that great vibe of, like, oh no, pirates are actively still terrible in this world. It's just that Luffy romanticizes the fuck out of them, and so you're seeing the kind of pirate he wants to be. And I thought that was great.
Yeah, the basic arc for Luffy in that part, I think is really, really strong, and I think how they adapted his dynamic with Shanks as well. The child actor isn't the greatest in the world. Some scenes he's solid, some other scenes he's very stiff, but that's just something that comes with the territory. I think we've been spoiled with really gifted child actors of late, that seeing like a more average one that again is like, oh yeah, that's generally how child actors are and these kind of things. But I think the flashback stuff there and how they, to give it a benefit and structure, I do quite like how it was intertwined between these two episodes. I don't know how it reads for someone who hasn't seen the One Piece backstory before of Luffy, but I think it was very effective of having something in the present relate to something in the past with Luffy, and then going through that back and forth, especially in the second episode, like the transition between when he's drowning in the sea and then he's drowning in the present and then he's saved by Shanks and then saved by Zoro. I think a smarter one that they did in the first episode that I think was very subtly done was paralleling the scene where Shanks is being harassed by the bandit and he spills everything over the floor and Shanks has to mop it up, and Luffy's really annoyed by that because as a kid he doesn't understand, like, why didn't you do anything with that guy kind of thing. And then when he sees Zoro handle a similar situation, but with someone younger, and it's about to get violent, he does what Shanks did when he was in trouble as a kid, and comes in and saves her, or not saves her, but just like takes care of the guy. That's something like he recognizes, like, oh, I like this, and that's not in the manga. That parallel is something that like they probably just retroactively looked at. Oh, there's two similar scenes to this. We can have that be a reason of why Luffy is kind of interested in Zoro. Stuff like that happens a lot. Bit by bit pass throughout, and again, it's not done as a masterclass of filmmaking, but within the conditions they had, I'm sure with Netflix and the notes and stuff that Steve said, it's done pretty entertainingly. Like it's done in a way where it still gets those ideas across. Like I don't, from just those first two episodes, I don't think there's an idea present in those arcs that isn't on across, and a theme in those arcs that isn't presented that's in this thing. It's not maybe done as well in certain spots, but I think in other spots it's actually done more effectively, which I think is interesting.
I feel like they're banking a lot on the show continuing because of Shanks primarily, because Oda always has said how he had a plan for One Piece since the very beginning, and that he knows what the ending is going to be or whatever. And I believe him, but I am sure he has made a ton of shit up in between, because the original manga was only supposed to last 5 years, and then he just kept going. So in the beginning of chapter 1, when the big sea monster comes out and bites Shanks' arm off, he just glares at it and it runs away in the manga. In the adaptation, they like really specifically film that so that you know it's a hockey, which is surprising, and that seems like something you would only do if you feel like you got enough time to get enough into the series to where you could have an explanation of what hockey actually is. That seems kind of gutsy to me, to just be like, episode 2, here are hockeys.
There's a lot of stuff with that. Like the one that gets me for that is Garp.
Yeah, fucking Garp is in this so quick.
Yeah, that's the thing. And if Ian, I would actually be really interested if you do continue with this. So I won't go too much into who that character is and stuff, because I think that's something you've been remained pretty unspoiled on. But he's just, for context, a character that shows up much later in the story that they've put into this, and even in his first 2 episodes, he's quite present. And that's the old guy, Marine dude.
Oh, the Admiral?
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah. He's the guy that turns up and stuff, and is the Scottish dude and things at Gold Roger's execution and things. For context, that would be like if you did a arc in Dragon Ball where you adapted the very first tournament and then like Vegeta's in the background for some reason. Like he's just rolling around. Like that's the equivalent of it with this.
No, you fool! It would be Raditz doing recon,
There you
trying
go,
to see
right.
what his brother's potential
Yeah,
is.
that's
You
a
fool! You don't even know what the fuck you're talking
that's
about.
a much
Yeah.
better comparison. Yeah, so that was a one where I'm like, I don't. That's a flaw for me because as well, I much prefer how Garp is in the actual manga. I think
Same,
the character his characterization here is way too serious for me. It's kind of like what the problem you had with Boogie, Steve, where like they made him too competent.
Yeah. Well,
But like, go ahead.
oh, sorry, I was gonna say, I like the guy who plays Garp a lot, but like it was a thing where I saw him and it just threw me. I'm like, doesn't this guy like not show up until like 400 chapters into the fucking manga?
Yeah.
It's such a weird thing to do.
I wonder.
You think when you've got that much wealth of material, how many times do you think they fucking like reread the goddamn manga
Gotta be thousands
before they decide to like start writing episodes and shit?
They've got to do because I know the guy Matt Owens is the showrunner, and little kind of your dreams could come true, fellas. Is he actually used to be a YouTuber, and he's a huge One Piece fan, and he was recently on one of his friends' YouTube channels. He didn't have that many subscribers. He had like 10k subs or something, and he was doing the live stream. And he's the One Piece showrunner, and he was like ranking the arcs and stuff. So he was a fan of stuff, but he spoke about how like they had the exact manga with them all the time. They actually had another fan called Library of O'Hara, who is a One Piece YouTuber, and he has a Twitter account, and he's the guy who helps out with, you know, when the fan translations of manga chapters come out. So, you know, the weekly manga chapter scanlation dude, because he's such a library of One Piece knowledge. They had him on call to like check timelines and dates. So if you look at like the newspapers and stuff people are reading, the events depicted in the newspapers are what would actually have been happening in the One Piece universe at that period in time in that specific day. Like they went crazy with how much like detail and overall stuff with the manga. And what I'm curious is, because of the changes to some stuff, because some things are so like tight and like this is exactly what it is, reverence for it. Whenever they do deviate, it almost stands out more, because that like the Garp thing is like, that's such a big change. Why did Oda do? Is that something that maybe he regrets not introducing Garp earlier? Is that something where, because Garp in the manga at the moment has a very big role, is he trying to do some cross promotion of like, let's introduce this guy to the Netflix guys, and if they read the manga, they'll know who he is, kind of thing. So I'm torn on that. But it's like a really interesting thing, and that's something that I really like with this type of adaptation, where we don't have to worry about them covering the beats of the story, which is so refreshing. It's more interesting to see the deviations now. Like I would love anything comic book related that like was exactly the book with some changes here and there, because then it would just be fun to talk about instead of being like, man, I wish they just adapted the book, you know?
Well, and along with Garp, right? They gave a lot of screen time to Kobe. That was
big
strange to
time.
me too. Like he's in so much of that second episode, and they do the whole interaction between Garp and Kobe, where he's like, "What's your deal?" so early. And I'm kind of the opposite as you, where I'm just kind of like, I feel like there's too much of a reliance on trying to make this as tight and as accurate as possible. Like I really resist the mentality that you want the fans involved and you want YouTubers and you want like really tight timelines and stuff. I think kind of shackling yourself to trying to be as accurate as possible, and then creating something that has to naturally have wiggle room sort of puts you in a weird spot. And I kind of would have wished that they would have just been like, you know, where the story of One Piece goes up to a point, because that's all there is so far. And if you enjoy it, you can adapt it on your own in a way that takes it in a different direction, where you don't have to feel the need to try and stick things in the same order if they don't fit naturally. I mean, my biggest manga anime adaptation hot take is I think the original Fullmetal Alchemist is infinitely better than Brotherhood, and the only reason people like Fullmetal Alchemist Brotherhood better than the original, literally the only goddamn reason, is because Brotherhood adapts the manga straight, and the original is its own story because it was doing its own thing with the material that's there. And you know what? The manga Fullmetal Alchemist, not that fucking good. So they rearranged the story, changed what certain characters are supposed to symbolize, changed some names, moved around and shifted stuff, effectively made the same series, but adapted it as an anime in a way that I think works better. And I really, really want this adaptation, or I really wanted it to lean more into that stuff, where if you're gonna do stuff like introduce Garp from the very beginning, then just kind of go your own way, right? Like at that point, the thing is just you have all the characters, you have all the guideposts. If you feel like you don't know where someone goes, then you can use the manga as a reference. But I really don't think I really hate the mentality that everyone goes into with adaptations of manga, where the principle of the matter is always adapt it as straight as possible. Because that was Cowboy Bebop's problem too. Cowboy Bebop's big problem was that it tried so fucking hard to just recreate those 20-minute episodes and then fill in the gap for the rest of the 20 minutes. And that was its whole downfall. Instead of structuring a show around 40-minute episodes as its own original thing, where the original anime was a guidepost, they tried too hard to stick to it. And I feel like you have an opportunity here where if the manga's not done, no one's going to blame you for going in a different direction because it's not done yet. You don't have a choice. So why not just lean into the differences instead of trying so hard to adapt specific chapters straight?
I definitely get that. I think for me, the novelty of that is still pretty fresh. So it's still something that just on a seeing this recreated somewhat beat for beat is interesting to me. I don't know if I would be as interested in a One Piece series that was a little bit more constructed from fresh, because I do think a lot of what makes One Piece is very specific to Oda, because he's someone that is so tightly crafted and so tightly, this is what I planned from the beginning, that I do think you mess with that too much, it kind of all falls apart. And I think the other thing with that I like is I do like having almost this multimedia, mixed media thing now, where I'll use the example of Ian, right? Is you were never going to watch One Piece's manga and stuff like that. You were never going to go through all these kind of things. But because of what this is established now, right? If I say, oh, Boogie the Clown, this thing, you know what I'm talking about. Like it creates almost like a shared community language, and I really like that experience in kind of these larger than life franchises of being able to have discourse with people that aren't as super into the weeds of the community, right? Like I like being able to talk with Dragon Ball fans that aren't anime fans specifically. I don't know if you guys have had that experience. You're just people who watch Dragon Ball on Cartoon Network and just don't know the rest of the anime fan, because you get interesting perspectives and stuff. So I guess for me is I'm looking forward to being able to talk to One Piece fans who got the live action, so they know enough to have the same order of events as, say, manga or anime fans, but still have their own differences and takes and stuff. Like, I don't know, that's interesting to me, of being the same story but being close enough where it's almost like different branches of a tree. I definitely agree with you, Steve. That's maybe not as conducive to actual quality of a show,
Well,
but for
yeah.
for my personal enjoyment of just talking to people and consuming thing, that's fun for me, if that makes sense.
I totally see what you're saying. My big thing sort of just comes down to in that perspective is every work in its own respective medium is doing its own thing. And when you experience the voice acting of One Piece, it's giving you a different read on the material than if you're filling that in by looking at the art on the manga versus if you're watching it in one of the compilation movies or something like that. Like, these are all different things and different experiences. And I really resist the idea that you can kind of universalize it all in a shared language where the story sticks to the same beats across all mediums, because at that point it's really just a wiki entry, and you can just take the wiki entry and anyone can turn it into anything. But the nuances and the fandom and the appreciation of it is kind of specific to the medium, and it's specific to how you experience it within those differences. Knowing the Full Metal Alchemist manga and knowing the original anime yield two very different conversations, and I think that's important. And I think there's even now, right, we talk about how much of a good word of mouth One Piece has. I bet you if you go on Twitter right now, there's 1,000 people for every 100 people that like One Piece live action talking about how actually you should watch this or read this because it's closer to the manga, and like that kind of bullshit. And I just hate that so much. I'm like, being closer to the manga is not conducive of any kind of quality. It just means it's closer to the manga. And that kind of like courting authenticity by being closer to the manga is a behavior I really resist in anime adaptations.
I think that's fair to a point with like almost any adaptation. Of kind of the strength of adapting something is you get to see what works and what doesn't, right, and try to like fine tune and fix it. Talk about something that I'm a big fan of. I know you like as well, Steve. Alfie still hasn't watched it because despite what he says, he doesn't actually love me. Green Lantern in the animated series, right?
So good.
Like I really like Jeff Johns' run. It's still got a lot of flaws. Particularly, like, as you get closer to Blackest Night, it almost becomes like, it starts to read like rules for an RPG game. Oh, well, Red Lanterns are like this, but they're weak to Blue Lanterns, and Blue Lanterns are weak unless there's a Green Lantern around. Like, the rules start to get kind of fuzzy and kind of silly. So I don't love aspects of it. I love a lot of the concepts, I love where a lot of it ends up, but, you know, Green Lantern the Animated Series, however, sees what works, what's like attractive, what's cool about John's run, and decides not to try to fix continuity along the way, but just take that good stuff and do its own thing out the gate. And so it's adapting elements from his run, mostly entirely his run. You get like one episode with the Spider Guild, which is a Silver Age villain, and then there's like Steam Lantern, which I think maybe is a reference to another fucking Green Lantern comic I've never read. But it's mostly just adapting stuff from John's run and then telling its own story and just taking what works and trying to make a new machine out of it. And it's super fucking effective. It's arguably the best thing DC's ever done in animation. And maybe in general. At this point. But like that's the strength of adaptation, whereas doing something as close to the page or the source of adaptation as possible can be really inherently weak. Trying to think of a good example from this, because DC did a bunch of those,
like the Killing Joke animated movie that tries to be straight up.
But see, like, not like it's straight adapted for the last half, and even then they make changes. Like they added a whole half, so like I as much as I don't like what they've added, I don't think that's actually a very strong example because they've added something. I'm trying to think of something that's like, and DC just happens to be the one that does this the most with like direct adaptation.
I think the closest example to One Piece would be the Under the Red Hood movie, because it follows the beats, but it also has the advantage of it brought in the original writer, so that those changes are almost like exactly. So like it's less like an adaptation and almost like a second draft, almost is what those feel like.
For sure.
And it's not like mired in continuity and stuff at that point. It gets kind of like pick and choose what it wants to take from, whereas the original events, like, okay, well, we got to tie it in with Infinite Crisis.
That's why I think One Piece is closer to.
Yeah, I mean that's fair. Something like the New Frontier movie comes to mind because that is almost a lot more direct.
All-Star Superman.
Fucking All-Star Superman's a good one because that is a lot more direct. It's just leaving stuff out for time. Fucking I'd say Dark Knight Returns if they didn't decide to take narration and turn it into dialogue.
That changes
which
the
is
movie
still
a
the cardinal.
lot.
It is the fucking cardinal sin of that movie, and people who tell me it doesn't matter do not understand that fucking book.
I like the adaptation of Dark Knight Returns a lot. I think it's a good two-parter, but changing the narrations to dialogue does fundamentally change that movie.
It's like so hard. It's not even funny. So yeah, but like there is a strength to that adaptation, and pursuing a pure adaptation does kind of feel like a fool's game in a lot of ways, because you're like undermining the very thing that like is inherently advantageous to what you're doing, and also who are you gonna please anyway, because really a true to life adaptation would basically just be you just take the panels and put them on screen, and I've made motion comics. No one fucking watches those, man. So yeah, I don't know. It seems like it's worthwhile. But that being said, they are doing a close adaptation. They are taking a lot of the elements. They're trying to be really faithful. But I think by your guys' own admission, the fact that they're introducing a late stage character literally from episode 1 and 2 kind of shows that they are at least attempting to do long-term planning and take some things that work and play to some of the strengths of adaptation. The Shanks example you brought up earlier, I don't even know what the fuck you're talking about, but with him showcasing this power that isn't revealed till much later in the series, in this flashback in which it did not originally exist.
Well,
that is a strength.
It just that's one of those weird retconny planning things where, like, in the first chapter, he gets his arm ripped off, he looks at the snake, he glares at it, and it goes away. We don't understand that is a superpower, quote unquote, until much later, but the event itself is not changed.
Okay, well, I'm going to tell you right now. I did not understand that it was a superpower.
Even though it changed his eyeball?
His eyeball didn't really change. His pupil just dilated.
You looked into his eye, and then it flashed to the monster, and then the monster's eye changed, and it went away.
Oh, okay, the monster's eye changed. Yes, I did notice that. I thought you were talking about Shanks' eyes. No, not Shanks' eyes. I thought it was just fucking pupil. In that case, yes, within those parameters, I got that he was doing something to it, but I didn't really know that it was going to be some, like, superpower that's important to the characters going forward. I could kind of guess maybe they were going to go with something like I got that this will be important for later. Jot that, don't you forget that one. But I didn't really know the significance of it. It just kind of felt like a little bit of flavor to the world of like, oh, maybe that's just his thing, is he has like an animal tamer kind of vibe to him or something. I wasn't really sure what else to make of it beyond that.
That always kind of screamed to me, reading the manga, as he just kind of made that up later and he wants to pretend like he didn't. But that's just me not being very generous to Oda. Because I don't know, at a certain point when people are like, I've planned all of this from the very start, I feel like they're kind of full of shit. And that's one of my things with One Piece, where I just feel like, I'm sure you think you planned all this in the beginning, but it really awfully looks like you just made up something later to justify it, that it happened early on. But maybe that's just me.
The biggest thing in your favor with that, Steve, that this thankfully cuts out, because I think people acknowledge that that's like a big problem, is like just in the terms of the thing, is it's revealed, and it's kind of implied here, but it's revealed later in the story that Shanks is one of the strongest pirates in the entire franchise. Like he's like one of the big guys. He's like the Beerus almost, in terms of like how much stronger he is than everyone else. It's like ridiculous. But in chapter 1, he loses his arm to this Sea King, and like you see the size of this thing, and like in the Netflix it works even better, because he just the fights they're impressive, but they're not as like anime Dragon Ball. You can see this thing like killing people still. Like this is a crazy Godzilla sized monster. But in the anime and the manga, the end of chapter 1 is after Shanks loses his arm to this thing. is Luffy now growing up to the age we see him, and with one shot he takes out that fucking Sea King in one punch. So like,
Yeah.
Shanks, how did you lose your arm to this weak ass entry level, one level thing? So like, it makes no sense. So like, I think that is a very good argument that like he did not plan for Shanks to end up being that strong originally. That was not the plan.
I love Shanks in the manga, but everything about Shanks feels like you literally just made this up for right now. Okay, then.
To get to the show though, specifically, what did you think of my performance? Like, how did you like Shanks?
I thought he was fine. He didn't blow me away. I feel like he kind of lacked the sort of gravitas and screen presence that I think a Shanks character really needs, because he in the manga and in the anime he's always going to be like this looming figure in Luffy's life, and so much of Luffy's like uncharacteristic outbursts of anger are fundamentally related to Shanks, like when people diss him and stuff. And I just didn't feel much chemistry at all between the guy playing Shanks and the kid. And sure, child actors can be hit and miss, but I really feel like Shanks should have shouldered that half of the relationship, and he kind of didn't for me. He looks good. I like that they still seem to like fundamentally keep a lot of the stuff about the character that's unique, like the fact that he like mops up the beer that gets spilled on his head and everything. But he just didn't stand out enough for me. He's not bad, but he kind of fits the same vibe as like Zoro for me, where he just kind of feels one note. He feels like the actor was hired and was given precisely one thing to do, which is you need to kind of just stoically stare and sometimes say wise things, and that's all he does. And
They should have got Liam Neeson.
yeah, really. I just kind of wish he had something to him that made him feel more prominent.
Outside of that, then I'm just curious. I think Ian, outside of Luffy, was there anyone else in the main cast or from these episodes you've seen that kind of like piqued your interest or you thought did a particularly a good job?
I don't know if performance-wise anyone else really hit for me. Zoro was kind of just static, and you're aware of my long-standing hatred of Zoro, not for anything the character's done, but just for the fact that now I can't look up things about Zoro Don Diego de la Vega without getting fucking One Piece character. So he did not justify himself. He's not as cool as Don Diego de la Vega. So I don't know. He was kind of just stoic. Steve mentioned he didn't like the Nami actress. I didn't really have one thought of her one way or the other. I was a bit surprised by the like cliffhanger reveal at the end with the fucking weird snail telegrams, and so that was kind of neither here nor there. Shanks was kind of okay. I don't know. For me, it like he felt like the actor that was kind of phoning it in the most to me. I didn't love the performance. I didn't hate it or anything, but just like thinking about it now, I'm like, I almost feel like I can see him reading the cue cards off camera or something. Though when he does tell the fucking sea monster thing to go away, that was pretty good. I did like that moment. Otherwise, what's his name with the pink hair? Kobe. Okay, I liked him. He was fun. Like that kid was like just looked like he was shitting his pants the whole movie, and I'm a sucker for like a fox and a hound style story. So the fact that he's like, no, I want to be a Marine. Luffy's like, all right, I help you do that. It's like, hey, the next time we meet, we might be enemies. Well, right now we're not. I'm like, that was kind of like sweet. I like the idea that sets up. I thought that was pretty good. And the way the characters performed it, I thought worked out pretty well. And just everything you got to see with him after the fact of like him being interrogated and he like, no, he's a pirate. He deserves to be punished right out the gate. I don't know. I was pretty impressed by that. I liked that quite a bit. The writing there and the performance kind of really meshed quite well to me.
Yeah, I like the Kobe stuff a lot. I think that's an interesting dynamic that they set up with One Piece, and there's something I think adds to One Piece is kind of that like good-hearted nature to it. Is I think that conflict could be something that would be treated a little bit more, I guess, dire. Of like, well, this is Luffy's pirate and marine, and maybe this is going to be these things. But Luffy, they very quickly portray as a character just incapable of holding a grudge of that kind of thing, or having any. As long as you're following your dream and not hurting people by it, you're good in his book. And I think that's a really refreshing idea to, like you said, have that just immediate support of that idea of like, okay, yeah, I'll help you do that. Like, let's get this sorted, because that's how he wants to be treated with his dream. And that's what I liked with Zoro's stuff. Is I actually do want to push back a little bit on the Zoro things, because I actually found him really charismatic. Zoro kind of stole the show a little bit for me. I'm 3 episodes deep. But even just in these 2 episodes, I really, really like the Zoro take in terms of just like, he still has that humor that he has in the show, but I don't particularly like Zoro in the show because he's so over the top with it. It kind of kills the joke for me. I like that a lot of his jokes you can kind of miss if you're not really paying much attention to it, and I think that's really funny. Of like, he's kind of monotone, but a lot of the things he says when he's going straight to alcohol a lot of the time, and that just keeps being this like running gag in the background of like any opportunity he gets, he's gonna get piss drunk. I think that's really, really fun, to not make like a big deal. I think a lot of lesser shows would like really hammer that comedy home to get the point. I really respect the fact that they kind of let the Zoro jokes, they're there if you want them to be, but if you don't get them, you don't get them, right? The thing with Nami's actress so far, I'm kind of with you guys, where she hasn't shown anything for me particularly blowing. I know the Nami stuff is something that's the end of this series, is where like her backstory and stuff comes into it, and that's a lot more emotional. So I'm hoping by the time we get to there, she'll kind of pull out the stops, and then this was kind of her being kind of one note would be more of a choice, but we'll see when we get there. This is too early to say from just these things. So I agree with you, but by and large on that, I liked a lot of the performances, and something with the performances that I think goes in hand in it, because I do want to make sure we talk about this, because I know I saw Steve on talk about that he doesn't like this on Blue Sky, but I want to push back a little bit on that, because I would talk about the fight scenes and stuff. I really, really did like the action in this. I thought the action was like, it's not the greatest thing I've seen in the world, but this is probably the best action I've seen in a TV show in like 8 years, maybe more, maybe 10. Like, I think this is really, really well
man.
done. No, man, this was really good, Steve. I don't know what you're talking about. I really like the action in this. I thought this was great.
I really okay. Real quick. Well, just to go back real fast. I did not like Zoro in this, but the actor who plays him is really good. And if you want to see other stuff with him, where he gets to actually do sword fights like this, he plays Anishi, the final bad guy in the Rurouni Kenshin live action movies, and he's fantastic in that. The live action Rurouni Kenshin movies are incredible. If you haven't seen them, you absolutely should. He's in the second to last one because the last one's like a prequel, but he's super, super good in that. And the back and forth between him and Kenshin in that movie, incredible stuff. Really, really good. But anyway, back to this. I really didn't like the action. My big problem with the action in this is I just didn't feel like there was any impact to any of it. You know, like I thought there was. I feel like there are too many like front and center bits that don't have any sort of environmental consequence. The Transformers movies by Michael Bay, right? They are far from, cinema. But Michael Bay does one thing very well, which is action. And he knows that when he has a giant CGI robot flick a car with its wrist, that he's going to have to blow up this fucking car so that it's moving in the direction that the CGI is going to be animated on top of, so that it creates the illusion that there is this big, impactful thing. And I feel like with this show, there was too much of actors in the foreground doing things but not enough consequence around them to the point where they kind of just felt like they were popped out of the universe. A lot of the camera moves feel kind of wild to me and not full of any sort of intent. When Luffy does the thing from the manga where he punches Buggy and it pops a hole in his chest and then he pops it back in, the thing itself is cool if you know what it is, and if you've seen it before, it's still cool. But the action of watching it, I just didn't find very visually interesting. I just thought it was kind of flat.
Okay, can I jump in here real quick? Two things. Thing number one, when he punched the hole in Buggy, I laughed, but not for the reason that I should have. I laughed because it looks exactly 110% like that scene in the beginning of Kung Pao or the Fist, where he punches the hole through the guy, and the narrator's just like, holy crap, man. Like, I'm no doctor, but that was just like one clean shot.
That's such a fun movie.
It is. So that was thing number one. Thing number two, I do kind of agree with Steve that the action isn't shot necessarily very well, because, like, there's just so, like, there's one scene where they're all fighting the fucking metal jaw guy, Baron von Underbite, and it fucking killed me, where, like, Zoro and Luffy are fighting this dude, and you just, like, kind of see the camera whip, and Nami's just standing back there with, like, her fucking staff over a bunch of dudes who are all passed out, just not helping. And I was like, that's not a good look.
That probably didn't phase me from the show because that's what Nami just does. So I'm used to that, I guess. That's Nami. I was surprised she fought as much as she did in this.
Fair enough. I just saw that. I kind of got, like, a kick out of it. Of, like, it just felt like they forgot what to do with her, and the actress just, like, maybe, like, forgot to leave the set or missed her mark or something. I don't know. It's just really amusing.
For me, that I really appreciate is I think they do a really good job, because a lot of these actors did all of their own stunts, and Jackie Chan had a thing about this where the reason why a lot of movie action scenes aren't good is because the actors can't fight, and, like, a fight is never going to look as good as a fight. And the repertoire of all of these guys is that they do actually know how to do this, so they don't have to do a lot of cuts to hide stuff. They'll just show when Zoro has, like, a fight, like in that fight in the bar and stuff. It's just Zoro's actor the whole time doing all that thing, so they don't need to cut away. They can just take a nice medium shot and let it play out and cut between two different angles and just have cool choreography. And when I saw that, man, I was like, oh, fuck yes, they get it. They get how to do this where they don't have to try and, because they try and do it with the cinematography in terms of, like, close-ups. Like, they do a lot of really high close-ups, which I assume is an attempt to recreate, like, manga panels where, like, it's a lot of, like, headshots and stuff like that. That's kind of hit and miss. Sometimes it works well, sometimes there's just too much of it. I hope they pull back on that a little bit too. There's that, like, they really, really like the close-up fisheye. But in terms of how the action is shot, especially for someone like Luffy, they could have really made him extremely stiff in how he does stuff. They could have tried to force his gum powers in every single interaction and fight he has. But when they do it, it feels cool. Like, when he does that first shot with the fist, like, the effect isn't the greatest in the world. It doesn't look super realistic, but I don't need it to look realistic. I just need to have impact. And he sends a fucking fly, and the sound effect is, like, pretty and, like, good. I was like, okay, I'm down with this. And it's the same thing when he does the kick attack, the whip. When Zoro has, like, the sword to his neck and just whips around and clocks him. It's like that. I felt that felt visceral. That felt really cool, and that was something which that's why I kind of want to go to task with it. Is I think it's something where they're working within their means with these things, but in terms of with a production dies this big and all these kind of things this huge, the action for it definitely was a standout to me, and I'm really interested in some of the other fights they're going to adapt in the rest of the series when things get a little crazier, what that's going to look like. But just for now, just from this, like, early sampling, I was really kind of impressed by that, and I actually do think that is, like, a really strong, like, advantage of, if you're just watching this on Netflix and you want a reason for why this is like something you might want to check out or something, I would list the action as like a reason why you probably won't see many other shows airing right now that have action like this.
I guess I'm kind of in the middle between you two. I didn't really have much thought on the fights. I just don't think they were shot super well. I thought they were, but I don't think I agree with Steve, and they're like actively bad. So I'm kind of in the middle, I think.
Makes sense. It makes sense, and I think as well, like it's interesting with us though, Steve, because I think we'll be like completely united on like John Wick. I mean, like that is our shit, man. That is the thing. And then like other action scenes
Boring.
will have
Guy with a gun. Don't give a fuck.
we'll have completely different takes on it, which I think is really funny. That's also an aesthetic thing with just like fight scenes in general. I think there's a lot more personal, which is always interesting with like how this stuff is shot. So I like hearing the take on it.
It's also like it's such a fundamentally more difficult thing, in my opinion, to I feel like do hand-to-hand combat that looks good on film versus gunplay. Because with gunplay, it really is just a matter of the cut. It's the get the shot where it's fired, get the shot where it hits, and you can go above and beyond in that. But like your baseline is pretty simple. Versus hand-to-hand combat, where you need the actors to be able to do it. So you've got the medium shots, but like even then, right? Like even your Bruce Lee's. Part of the reason that the fight scenes in Bruce Lee movies work the way they do is because you see him do it, but the cutting is also really on point so that you understand the reach and the geography and the impact of the hit. And so like it's a much harder task, I feel like, to do a hand-to-hand combat situation on a film that feels kind of engaging even if your actors are capable. It's like that joke of like just because you have a camera and you have sex in your bedroom doesn't mean that you're capable of shooting porn, because it's just a fundamentally different skill.
That's very true. That's very true. Okay, I do have one question, like canon-wise, I guess, because I was confused by this when Buggy said it, and I thought the story was going in one direction and it went in a very different one. So I knew that, like, if you ate a devil fruit, then you get superpowers, but also you can't swim, and if you're in seawater, you won't be able to use your powers, right? That's how that works.
You want in not just your powers, it's like kryptonite. Like you can't even move. You start feeling weak in general.
Okay.
Like it's exactly like kryptonite.
Okay, yeah, that's okay. So when they fucking like breaks the tank and it splashes all over him, especially since Buggy says like, just a couple splashes of seawater, and like they fucking break the tank and it splashes all over both Buggy and like Luffy's still covered in it. And I'm like, but then Buggy just starts fucking like fighting with all his superpowers. I'm like, what is this bullshit? He's wet. He should have superpowers. What the fuck?
Yeah, so
I was really bothered by that.
that's something which is inconsistent in the series as well. There's like a sand villain that Luffy fights where he defeats by like covering himself in water to get the guy wet, and it's just like, well, shouldn't that like turn your shit off as well? But the explanation they give is it has to be running water.
Fucking Dracula rules.
Yeah, so like if it's still, it's fine.
Weird. Okay. I guess.
But this is why I say
that just
one motherfucker with a super soaker can defeat the entire One Piece verse at me.
Except Shanks. Shanks does have some devil fruit.
Well, I don't know.
Shanks is still OP.
Well, with him, all I'm gonna need is the Loch Ness monster, so it'll be fine.
He's such a busted ass character, I swear to God.
I don't know what he's cooking with that.
I don't either, man. I don't fucking know.
He's cool now. I love Shanks. I'm doing a Shanks cosplay next year, actually, because Aaron's doing Boogie. We're gonna do that together, so it'll be fun.
Oh, that's gonna be fun. I like that.
So I'll get to reprise my role and hopefully not be as wooden to you guys this time.
Quick question.
Work on it.
Do we know if Ace has been cast? If Garp is already
No,
here?
Ace isn't cast. That they're hinted at. Yeah, they're hinted at that for season 2 though. Is season 2 they want to probably do everything up to Alabasta, which would have Ace and Robin and Crocodile and stuff. But that's not been confirmed.
Wild to me that Garp shows up before Ace. What the hell?
It's insane. It's insane.
It's so weird.
Dude.
What do you mean you have Garp but not Ace? Okay, whatever.
Yeah. But you'll get to. You know who the popular fan cast for him is though, and I think I actually could see it. Is Zolo from Blue
Yeah.
Beetle as
Yeah.
Ace?
Oh,
I
I
could
could see
totally
that.
see that. Yeah, I could
I
totally
can
see
see
him
that.
as Inaki's brother. That'd be great.
Well, that'd be cute. I'd like that. Yeah.
Cool. Cool. Alrighty. Do we have any final thoughts? Any final points of discussion with this one?
I guess I just have to ask: will you guys be continuing this series? And if you could be Netflix, or in Steve's case, because he'll just say no because it's Netflix. If you could be your studio of choice and greenlight a live-action anime adaptation, which one would you pick?
I'm not going to continue, most likely, unless like someone is goading me into watching it at this point, just because it's not really my thing. However, if I was gonna greenlight a live-action adaptation of any sort of anime or manga, I'm going for the fucking deep pull. I want a Big O adaptation. You know how fucking hype
Oh,
that would
man.
be? Big O is Gundam with a lesser budget because you're really only doing like the one mech that matters, and you can just make it like this fun existential noir thing about how God reset the universe and Batman pilots a mech. It's great. It's fucking awesome. I want that.
I may continue this. I'm kind of on the fence about it. I watched the first 2 episodes with Haley. I'll see how Haley's feeling about it, and that'll probably like determine whether or not we decide to continue watching it. I think. Um, as far as if I could greenlight any anime for a live action adaptation, I'm gonna be a cheeky bastard and probably piss you off, but I don't give a fuck. It's an anime. I'm gonna kind of go with Steve here and pick Giant Robots for the win and say Megas XLR needs a live action reboot. Let's fucking go.
Oh, that's an anime? I didn't know that.
Dude, it's not from Japan,
Oh,
but it is
okay.
100% an American trying to do an anime
It's
thing,
an
and
Avatar
it's fucking
situation. Yeah,
great.
okay.
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah, but like also it's hilarious. So,
No, I like that show. I
Living
genuinely
here in
didn't know.
Jersey.
I was like, what? I was like, did I miss this? Oh my god.
Dude, look at Kiva and tell me she is not somebody's fucking waifu. I swear to God.
I was like, I want to watch the sub version.
We take giant roads. How about you, Alfie? What's your anime adaptation of choice?
It's got to be Naruto. It's got to be Naruto. If you gave me this money and you gave me this exact structure for the seasons and stuff, I would do a killer Naruto adaptation. Easy. I would crush it. So that would be my pick. I think Naruto would translate easier to live action.
You think so?
From the One Piece as well. Because it's not as, the designs aren't as out there. You can really just kind of make them, like the stage shows and stuff have done pretty like good takes on what those characters would look like. So I think you could get away with a lot. And the only thing you'd have to care about them was like the effects. And then that's something like, to Steve's point, I think you'd really want to go all out on like the hand-to-hand choreography. You'd want to make that the selling point of the whole thing. You'd like really kind of like Bruce Lee kind of crazy ass, not even that, but just kind of like, the 2000s when we used to do a lot more of those fucking, what is it, I forget the name,
Like
fucking
Wire
yeah, but even like more recently, like IP Man, like you want IP Man style fights with a Naruto adaptation. Yeah, 100%. Because they
I feel like
canonically use Wing Chun, so I just get everyone to use that.
The thing with Naruto too is you'd want to do a substantial time skip because that's a function of the story that's warranted. But I'd almost want you to do it like House of the Dragon style, where you have a first half with younger actors, and then you just recast everyone for the time skip.
I probably like that as well, because I think you're going to run into a problem really quick of actors aging out of their parts, so you'd want to get to that. Just recast, I think, would be a good choice.
Yeah, it'd be pretty funny to see if you could try and pull that off. It would be rough because you'd need your main character to be visually iconic in both eras, but I think you can make it work.
Same actor for Kakashi the whole way through is unaging.
Let's go, Kakashi. Fucking Keanu Reeves plays Kakashi.
Ah,
No, Matt Smith. Just Matt Smith gets to be in everything that has time skips, and he's the one that doesn't change.
You know who Matt Smith could play though? He could play Donzo.
I could see Matt Smith as Danzo. That'd be funny.
Matt Smith
Who could
Donzo
Matt Smith?
would go hard.
Who could Matt Smith play in One Piece?
What's the one you like? Whitebeard?
Whitebeard. Yeah, how buff Matt. Like, he'd get pretty jacked for Morbius, so maybe he could do it.
Probably they haven't cast Alligator yet, right? I could think they play Alligator.
That's so funny that you called him Alligator when his name is Crocodile.
Oh, Crocodile. You know what I mean, damn it. Crocodile.
That's so fucking funny though, because it's not even like a misspell. It's literally just this. It's like a common misconception.
Crocodile, damn it! You know who I'm
That's
talking about.
so fucking funny, Steve.
Alligator.
Gonna top that.
Wow.
I think that's pretty good.
Alright, well on that note, I think we're gonna call it a day. Did I pick anything recently? I feel like I've skipped or something.
I did manga versus comics last week, and Alfie did this, so it's your go.
Okay, fuck it. I kind of want the excuse to read something. Nah, I don't know if you guys would be able to find the issues. Are you willing to do some, like, internet digging? Okay. Because I just want to talk about something bad, but something that I, like, not that I love this comic, but it's something that I love. It's part of a franchise that I love. So we're going to talk about, I have the trade version of it called Tales of the Green Lantern Corps Volume 3. I will figure out the exact issue numbers for you guys and get back to you, but it's the infamous story in which Hal Jordan and Aresia hook up. So I want to fucking reread and talk about that piece of shit.
Oh boy.
So that should be a good time. Alright. Until next time, everyone, thank you so much for watching. I'm the Philosopher.
Champion of the King of the Pirates.
And I will be King of the Pirates.
And we are your geeky gentlemen, and we will be discussing things.
If memory